Some friendships are just friendships. And then there are the ones that quietly shape the architecture of your life. The roommate who becomes your person, who accidentally and unknowingly sets in motion one of the most important relationships I now hold. Nisha has been in my corner through Google Desks, across continents, and across the kind of life chapters that don't have clean endings. She spent her career at the intersection of tech and regulation, asking with gumption who these systems are actually accountable to. She has the particular clarity that only comes from never fully belonging to one place. This is a conversation that I wanted to have for a really long time. And Nisha, welcome to Without Permission.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, especially talking to somebody who I've known for such a long time. Still, we are able to maintain that relationship.
Absolutely. That is so true. And a bit of context as well for everyone is just how long we've known each other. Has it been 15, 18 years now? Maybe even longer. I feel like I've known you forever. And one of the things, unknowingly, without meaning to, you really were the Cupid for my husband and I to get together. And in fact, you were there before he came in. And when the three of us became friends, it really formed a foundation that still lasts in my house today. What does it mean to you to leave that kind of legacy? Can I ask?
To be honest, when I hear that way from you, that just strikes an emotional chord in my heart because I did not think
Right.
that I was doing something really that special. But thinking back and looking back, it's very heartwarming to know that I was given an opportunity to play such an important role in both your and Manisha's life. So
Yeah.
it's something that I cherish every day, and that's gonna stay for a very, very long time.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something that I know my husband has told you many times. Thank you.
He tells me that every single year when you guys have your anniversary. For me, I had a very special bond with you from the get-go. Some relationships, like you said, it takes an effort to maintain them. But there are some friendships where you instantly you have that the soul connection.
Yeah.
And when Manish walked into our lives, it was more so when I knew that there was something special about him. He had a very pure heart, and then I wanted to make sure with all the things that were going on the side that he would be the nice person, like he would be the person for you. And it just things unfolded, and at that time it didn't feel like there was a lot that was going to be happening. It was just all fun and games, and like, oh, here's this really nice guy. I think he really likes you, and maybe there's a way
Yeah.
that this can be worked out. And that was a time when you were leaving for Canada, and you knew that you were so focused on your career and your MBA. But there's something inside me said that maybe I should try to pursue it and help him, because I knew that his intentions were very pure. And so that I was like, how could I not help him? And yeah. So
No, I remember you saying something very similar at that time as well, which really it takes some intuition to know people as well. And this takes me back to the time when we got to know each other. We're now 12 years into our marriage. You've traveled everywhere. We've lived in different places and we've met so many times. And 20s are really that time that things fall into place. We're trying to figure out what life means and who we are. And there's so much, there's a lot of pressure in your 20s, but also there are so many connections because of that that are made that are lifelong, and so many
yes.
decisions we take that are lifelong, which that's part of what's special. That's the reason I actually have always wanted to have this conversation with you. The actual trigger for it was when we have conversations about everything under the sun. And
Yes.
that has always been true,
There is no dearth of conversations.
no matter where we've been in our lives. And that's something I really enjoy. And this particular one was about recent events and things taking place in the world. In your curiosity, you were talking to me about the rise of data centers that are infrastructure that supports AI in being able to do what it does really well. But it was one of the first conversations where we looked at all sides of it. And one of the things that I enjoy about our conversations is we don't sit with one point of view and close our minds. We're always thinking through, we're always looking at what's there and the other side of the coin. That I think is a really important piece when it comes to AI and data centers, because there are so many impacts and effects we don't fully understand yet. What made you think about this aspect of things, and how did you come across it?
I started questioning, how is this impacting my cognitive ability? I think it was that curiosity that started this whole journey into researching and figuring out a little more about, like, where is this all coming from? What does it actually cost? When somebody is benefiting from it, there's a cost, there's a price that is being paid. So then who is paying the price for that? Where is this computing capacity coming from? And then when you start digging the layer in, it's the data centers need to be built. Chips need to be manufactured. So then what does it take for these data centers to be maintained? That even me, for a few months ago, when I did like a regular search on Google, some of the questions are very basic, simple questions that we ask. And even that is AI powered. So just to create that query and for this query to run and give you the answer, there's how many tons of water is being wasted for that, because in order to run that computing capacity you need to have those data centers running, and in order for those data centers to run, it requires fresh water.
Yeah.
But we don't think about that because I'm sitting in the Bay Area. For me, oh, this is great, like I'm just not going to use my calculator, I'm going to ask AI to tell me what is 30 plus 20. But I'm not thinking about
Yeah.
that. Who is paying the price for that? And I think this is where, when I started having this conversation with a few friends who work at Google, who still work at Google. I think we cross paths with them as well, and trying to
Yes.
understand how is the sausage made. And that is where I think all this triggered that curiosity, and which
Right.
led to from one thing to the other, and now looking at not just US, but like how is this impacting India. And even though we have lived out of India for how many years now, 15, like 12, 15
Yeah.
years, it's
Yeah.
still, you still have that emotional cord, that's home.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when you see there are things happening there, it's hard to just turn away and
Mhm.
just let it
Absolutely.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that that was a natural piece of almost a thinking about how am I getting this convenience that I'm getting and peeling back the layers to find what it is. And that's very you. One of the things, and just for everyone's context, is we worked at Google together, and that's exactly how we met and how we've come, even though we've moved on from there. But the tech field is something that has been a backdrop for as long as I've worked and as long as you worked. And the convenience of these recent additions and innovations are mind-boggling even to us who've been in tech for more than a decade, right? And so that's really where I love that you're starting to think about it. And you mentioned it a little bit. So we're both from India, we both grew up there, and as you said, we're both out, but we have really strong ties back to that, which is really true. What are these data centers? Maybe we know a little bit about their impacts around, but what really are the impacts of building more data centers in the US and in India if they're different? And what do people need to think about when
Yeah.
they think?
Yes. And that's, I think there are a few things that go into building these data centers. It's not just about building the data centers. How are we maintaining them? What does it
Mm,
take to maintain them, right? Like, because yes, we in the US, you see it has plenty of land. There is no dearth of land as a resource, so you can build it in the middle of nowhere and it'll be fine. But then what it takes to maintain is billions of gallons of water every year, and they're
right,
anticipating it to get into trillions of gallons of water, fresh water, every year. Then the other thing is something called as forever chemicals, which is PFAS, I think is the name of that. It's for these chemicals, once those are, because we just need those data centers need to be cooled down. They need to be kept in a
right,
certain room, in a certain temperature. And in order to maintain that temperature, we need chemicals, we need these coolants, plus we need fresh water. But there's a reason why it's called a forever chemical, right? Like basically, it is
They don't.
seeping into the soil and it
Okay.
doesn't biodegrade.
Right.
So it then, once it seeps into the soil, and if there are close by ponds, lakes, rivers, it will eventually get there. And
Right.
those are the water sources that farmers are using to grow our food. And we talk about people are getting a bunch of diseases, people are getting there's like some of it is like lifestyle diseases, but then we are seeing rise of like different types of cancers now. We are seeing rise of certain diseases which were not very common in the past, and now it's only increased. And there are some kids are being born with deformities, which was now not the case. The communities that sit around this data center in the US are suddenly complaining about brown water from their tap. So, and between the data center being built and them
Yeah.
getting the brown water from clean water, that's the
Mhm.
only change that happened. Who is accountable for that, right? Like how, so this is getting into our food, our water, our health, like this is impacting everything. But
Yeah.
the question is, who is benefiting from all of this? Like, what is the cost versus benefit over here?
Mm. So who is? I mean, it sounds like the cause is very clear, right? Are able to reasonably say this is why the water is getting worse. And when you say fresh water, I, I think that's what hits a node in a lot of people because it's a resource and it's a really important one to the very base of life. And so what are the answers to the questions? Like who is benefiting from this and how does that affect the fact that this is continuing at such a pace?
So, in terms of benefits, right? Like there are multiple benefits from that, but they're disguised as benefits, but they're not really
Right.
benefits.
Right.
It's a deep rooted question for the existence of humanity, right? And what it is to be human. One of the benefits, like good benefits that I could think of is we need for researching in medical field. Yes,
Mm.
it helps. If there's a doctor in one country and they're trying to perform a surgery in other country and they cannot go there for one reason or the other, like can they get AI assistance? Of course, that is very
Mm.
helpful. Just recently I learned that in agricultural field, you know how so many farmers spend a lot of time just picking out weeds, and it's a
Mhm.
very laborious task. And now with AI, they are able to have a laser focused way of taking the weeds out of the farmland. Is it beneficial? Yes. But the dark side of AI is we are using it for wars where there's strikes taking place without much human intervention. And who, again, like, is this ethical or is this unethical? And who is to
Right.
answer that? It's not just everywhere across the world, whether you look at the United States, you look at
Yeah.
India, you look at countries in South America. So that is where it's like, yes, there is a benefit of using AI in certain places, but there's also where we think is a benefit or is disguised as a benefit, but it's
Right.
not really. Like a lot more questions that need to be asked instead of just having like painting it with a broad brush.
Right. I like that. I like the painting it with a broad brush because it's very interesting to see the whole spectrum of it, where things can be great. The medical marvels. That's what I'm going to call them. But that's an incredible way to use technology to support a better life for humans and the earth overall. I've heard a lot of things about clinical trials as well, which matches
Mhm.
what you're saying, which is great. And then, of course, on the other side, it's thinking about what it's actually used for in terms of decision making. And I want to also connect this to something that we talked about earlier, which is the Earth. Are connected back to what's sustainable for our planet at this point. We know we've kind of pushed the boundaries of nature a little bit, and what does that mean when it comes back to the latest technology? Comes back to the infrastructure that's needed to run it. Like data centers, and what does that mean?
Yes, and I think this with climate change.
Right.
Anyway, we are seeing so much damage that we've already done
Right. Right.
has led to the climate change that we are seeing now. There's extreme weathers in Europe. that they hadn't seen. Like, and most of these buildings are not even built to have air conditioning, right? And we are, something that's unheard of, and that's even without AI boom, right? Like without even without these data centers. And
Yeah.
now, just in India, we are expecting by 2027 or 28. I'm a little hazy on the numbers, but there's again trillions of gallons of water being used just to maintain the data centers, just in India. And that number is only going to increase. And just yesterday, I was reading about an article where they said Punjab, is the northwestern state in India, their water table has already depleted by 67. And in our state, Karnataka, what's happening is there are rivers that are being used to pump like water from those rivers to data centers in Bangalore. And we have quite a few
Mm.
data centers in Bangalore. And I think in South India, apart from Bangalore, the only other place where there are data centers right now is in the Telangana state. So, talking about Bangalore, we are pumping, you are able to see riverbeds now that you were not able to see before. That's the amount of water that's going away towards
Sadness.
data centers. Yeah. And you know, Vesh, like during summer season, everybody complains about water.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
dearth of water, and this just feels like this is an extraction, this is exploitation of our resources. Because yes, we all need to, we all extract resources for our living, but it has to be done in a sustainable way. In India, they have given 20 years of tax holiday for big companies to come in and build data centers. But the question is this just a land grab, or is there actual benefit to India from this? From
Yeah.
all the, so what's happening? I'm trying to connect the dots between the US and India.
Right.
Yes, the whole AI boom started in the US, in the Bay Area. And they started building data centers all around in remote places in the US. And the community started protesting because they started getting brown water in their taps, and they started seeing young children with deformities and diseases they hadn't even heard of before. So when they started protesting, they shut down quite a few of the data centers in the US, which is about 50, if 52 data centers so far have been shut down due to local communities protesting.
That's incredible. Just
And
the work
that's,
they're able to have in terms of making an impact and change. Yeah.
yes, and that is a massive feat for the local communities who, it's
Mm.
David versus Goliath, right? Like here, they didn't even imagine that there was a chance for them to even win against these big tech giants. These are the companies that they have won these cases against, and those data centers have been shut down.
So, and you kind of already answered this, and that's where I was also curious about is how this what's the nature of this in the US versus India? Like everyone's
Yeah.
human at the end of the day. This is not great for environment either way, but yeah, what are we seeing that's unique in India as well?
Because these data centers have, like, because the local communities have been successful in shutting down these projects, this is
Yeah.
having, unfortunately, this is having an adverse impact in India now, because the demand for land, it's cheaper to buy land in India versus
Right.
these communities. The
Yeah.
environmental laws and regulations are way too relaxed in
Yeah.
India, or even in any Asian countries, because they're so driven by, okay, we need to catch up to the developed countries now because we weren't able to all these decades, or, and so now this is our time to catch up.
Yeah.
So I understand on one hand they want to catch up, and now that the data centers have been shut down here, India and other places see it as an opportunity to get these data centers to their country, right? But what are they catching up on? Like, if we have our environmental regulations are very laxed, and at this point companies are able to get the land for a fraction of a price,
Mm.
and there's nobody questioning them on the toxins they're dumping into the nearby rivers and ponds and lakes. Very recently, by recently I mean, I think it was in 2023, 24, in the Telangana state, they started a data center over there. They started constructing it or people, they didn't even know what was coming up. They were not consulted properly, or even though they were told that, oh, it's a data center, but what's the full blown impact, right? Like there's they don't know what they should be expecting. But the locals are complaining about all the toxins that are being dumped without treating them into the water very close by. And that's the water that our farmers are using again to grow food,
Right.
to grow vegetables, and to also for their cattle. And that's where we get our dairy products from. And so this is like one country fighting for saying that no, we are saying no to the data centers, means let's go to developing countries or poorer countries where we can take advantage of, like, getting their land, getting their
Yeah.
water. When India's water table, by the way, is also, I think it's one of the lowest in the world right now. And India is using more water than the US and China. This is just like, that's the demand that we already have. And we can only imagine, once these data centers are built, what pace, how much faster this water table is going to get depleted.
Yeah.
Ah, and the last thing I wanted to talk about is, then I think the question that I keep getting asked is, okay, but data is everything, right? Like, we don't want our citizens or our resident data to leave the country. So that is why we need these data centers. Is that really the case though? Because they're saying that, oh, this is going to be the biggest threat if we let everything sit in the United States, like all our citizens' data sit in the United States, so it needs to be localized. But is that what's happening? We don't know. Like, what is the contract that they have signed? You're giving 20-year tax rebate. You haven't taken into consideration the environmental impact that this is going to have.
Who knows if what they've built is for servicing locals, or is it servicing maybe back to the States or
To
globally? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very similar story that's unfolding in India that we've seen in the United States. The same story is unfolding where a few people in India will be able to control rights to what we eat, what we drink, the air we breathe.
Right. It connects back to where the impact is at this point. And I love that we've had examples, albeit in the United States, of there's pushback and there's actual impact that a group of people can have. Where do where do you stand here at this point in time in terms of your next steps? And it's this is a huge topic, and this is a heavy topic, and I can see you're very passionate about it as well. And so what's the next piece for you? Where are you trying to see success? You and I, we spoke as well a little bit about Erin Brockovich and her work, and it's no surprise. Everything that I've heard so far, it sounds very much like the work she's done in the past. So where does your work right now stand? And maybe even like, where are things that listeners can help you with as well? Where are areas?
Yeah. In the past few months, have spent a lot of time just mainly just reading through articles and the research papers and everything. And now I think I went through a bit of an emotional journey too, just thinking about, like, how can people not see this? Like, how
Mm,
can people not see the impact? Like, if you were to be offered, do you want good quality food, water and air, or do you want data center? What would one pick? Like, it's a no-brainer, but people are still, how can people not see that? From there, I needed to do a lot of self-introspection as to how I can contribute then, because a lot of the times what happens is we feel so inert that we are powerless and we are helpless. And and that's the beginning of the journey, right? Like, you feel that, and then from there it's like, okay, what's the solution? Either you say, you know what, I have enough, I've made enough, I have enough support, okay, this is happening in that country, who cares, let me go and live my life, and I have the luxury to move to any place else if something were to go haywire. And but the other side is, okay, do you stand up and fight? And that's the more difficult battle.
right.
And that's where I'm like, yeah, maybe I should at least give it a shot. And this is where I think you and I, Vash, like, we both talked about, okay, who do we talk to? Like, do we reach out to the existing nonprofits who are already working with farming groups and who are working on like seed factories, like seed banks. So do we reach out to them? Majority of the nonprofits, they did not get back to me, and the few that got back to me were not even aware of this. A lot of it is just about like the positive bias that people have towards this, thinking that, oh, it's going to be, oh, this is going to be great for humankind. So I think even the nonprofits over there are still yet to catch up to that. But it's good to see that there are some news stories that are floating around now. So I'm trying to reach out to see in my hometown if there's a farming community, to see who is leading that and having a discussion with them. And my mother, she comes from a farming family herself, and her extended family members, there are people over there that I'm getting in touch with. So at least to start that conversation, to even first step is education, right? Like otherwise people don't know. So just like trying to educate them and see then, okay, where do we take it from there?
Yeah. That's amazing. I don't know if I knew that your mom's from a farming family, so that's really a cool connection back as well, and an important one in this case. And we're talking about the impacts that this can have, and so I want to take it back to, we're not telling people to stop using innovation or stop using means to support innovation or going forward, right? What's something somebody can do to support this while, I'll take an example of myself. I do use chatbots for various things. I was talking in my previous podcast as well that sometimes it's the one thing where you need support or help, a quick answer, just something to unlock your work. And I'm able to do that in my tech industry, my work. And like we said, there are a lot of great use cases for this. That said, right, there's certain things that are popping up for me, and your conversation is one of the big ones where, like, we need to have regulations around this, and we need to have a full understanding before I think we're on the precipice of putting the cart before the horse, right? And do we understand the full impacts of this with the speed at which we're going? I realize this myself. I'm painting a really nuanced, potentially gray picture, right? Complicated picture of what this means. So what can individuals like me do to help support responsible use while not becoming Luddites? On the
Yeah.
other hand, I guess.
Okay. I'm not sure if you're going to like my answer. But I am so frustrated with the burden being put on the individuals when it's not the individuals who have decided to build the data centers.
Yeah.
So yes, there are things that you and I can do where any query we type in, we can think about like, okay, how much water is this consuming? How much fresh water is this consuming? Do I really need this? But I think it's bigger than that. It's not, it's this, yeah, it's going to be a little tangential, what I say. It's the same thing with single-use plastic.
Yeah.
People, they're like,
Right.
oh, you have to be conscious. Don't, like, no.
Yeah.
Why are you creating single-use plastic in the first place? Why aren't we regulating them? It's the
Right.
same thing. Like, if you and I, as individuals, where we can have the most impact is voicing our concerns to the government and holding the government responsible and
Yeah.
holding the tech giants responsible. You and me not looking, and I'm not doing a few queries here and there, thinking about water wastage is not going to have an impact at this magnitude because they are running at a lightning speed and
Yeah.
we are in our bullet car if we
Yeah.
do that.
I love that. And it's funny because the plastic, I do want to come back to that because I read something recently that said plastic, the beauty of it is the fact that it doesn't break down. Therefore, it had many use cases. But the irony of it is we use it as a single use when we know it's a forever thing.
Yeah.
And so that's 100%. I do think it's going back to you. It's not about us sitting in our tiny little chatbots making making the bigger difference. It's actually systemic. And we'll need to support a systemic change or push for a systemic change at that point.
I think when we
Yeah.
individually, if we come together and the collective force can move things, and that's
Mm,
where like instead of saying, oh, let me, the same thing with plastic, right? Like, oh, I'll try to recycle this, I'll try to do this, like how much of an impact does that have? And it goes back to when I was doing that, people were asking me question, oh, you're the only person who's doing that, like if how much of an impact are you going to make? Like, it used to anger me before. It's like, well, if everybody did this, it would make a big impact. I've now realized that it is not just on.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets to me as well because to your point, I think it's placing outsized guilt on users who are barely making that dent at an individual level, and that definitely resonates from what you're saying. Yeah. All of this, so it's heavy at the end of the day, right? There's a lot of weight to this conversation, figuratively speaking, but also just knowing the impact that it can have and what it means for us as a human race as we move forward as well. But how, with that said, how do you handle that? How, I've always been amazed at your curiosity and your gumption, like I said, to kind of push forward from this. And sometimes it's hard to continue to care at the same level that we're doing when it feels like you're using a spoon to chip away at a wall, right? And so where does that leave you in how you're kind of going about it? And what's your inspiration? I guess where's that kind of push coming from for you, and how does that drive you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there have been nights that I haven't slept well
Mm,
thinking about these things, like, because during the day you're so
yeah,
busy with work and other things, and when you're winding down at night, like that is when these things hit me. And I've spent a lot of sleepless nights just thinking about this. And then I think it's baby steps. It's sometimes it is smaller steps that lead to a bigger impact. Like, when and it's such an easy if I when I start having this conversation with people around me, like, they're like, oh, you're losing a lot of mental peace just thinking about this. Why are you doing this to yourself when you have everything to not care about this? But there are always going to be people who will say that, and then that also has an additional impact on me, right? Like, it's okay, maybe I'm just being.
burden on you. Yeah,
Yeah, so maybe it makes me question, like, okay, am I too passionate? Is it like a doomsday propaganda that I'm running in my head? But I think at the end of the day, I've told myself I need to take baby steps and think about very small little actions, which is reaching out to the farming communities, reaching out to the nonprofits. And I'm trying to see the connection between, yes, there are no nonprofits that are directly working on this, but there are nonprofits that are working on seed bank. There are nonprofits working on, like, making the farmers' lives better, trying to get them whatever they need for their farming, right? So trying to make a list of all those communities and groups and
yeah,
reaching out to them would be a first step. The other thing, I think I'd floated this idea with you, and was
yeah,
very similar to what Erin Brockovich did for the United States, where she was mapping out the upcoming data center projects. Here are the existing data centers. So at least people had the information. And
yeah,
that requires, and the challenge with that is, in India, we do not have clean data to build that map. So
right.
then the first step would be trying to
Map it out. Only when you know what extent of the problem it is, you can support it.
map.
That makes sense. Well, this has been really, really interesting. I want to take a little bit of a pivot, if that's okay.
Yes.
And I do, you know, going back to who we are personally. I've known you through, I think, four continents, right? And different regulatory roles that you've held and various phases of our lives personally as well. And I know for a fact that there's a lot that you handle, the ability to amalgamate in different places while you're having your root back in India, supporting your family, being the backbone for them, building your life on your own term. I don't think I've seen that as often as one would think for someone from our backgrounds. That's, of course, shaped a lot of who you are, but I also wonder who holds you, who kind of, or maybe it's a what and a where, or what holds you together as you go through life.
I I think when the burden is so big, and like we've talked about me having to be the backbone, at least at least up until a couple of years ago, I had to hold a lot of space for my family and help them. And that when that burden becomes is so big at a very young age, it is kind of a lonely journey. And there is, in terms of who holds me, I, to some extent, yes, I did get the emotional support from my family as well. It was a cohesive um, coexistence, right? Like, or symbiotic relationship. But lately I've been realizing that it's only to some extent. The kind of struggles that you go through, it's yours.
Yes.
It's so yours innately. It's very hard for somebody who hasn't been in the same shoe to understand that. And it's being the eldest daughter. Um, we are all parentified kids. That's the new term that I learned recently. So, being the parentified kids, what does that mean? It means to put yourself last, take care of everyone else before you. And that's how we're conditioned. That is seen as normal in our society. And that is something that now I'm slowly starting to realize how much I had to sacrifice. And I'm not unique in that way. No, in no way I'm unique in that situation, because there are so many stories that I have read about where women have sacrificed their personal life to an extent they've chosen to not even get married because they're so invested in their family, because it's financially, they need to help them, they need to make sure that the younger siblings are getting married, they're getting educated, either one of the breadwinner of the family has passed away. So we see these stories day in day out, and these are the people who are very silent warriors, if you will, and is going to take some time to break that. And I see a lot of women are now coming out and holding their own. And this is where, like, I know it's a little long-winded way of answering, like, who holds you. I think it's loneliness can be a part of that journey, and it can be a very sweet part of the journey too, because once you start becoming friends with loneliness, it has definitely opened doors for me. I want that quiet time these days, and for
Right.
contemplation and self introspection, and it helps you grow. And when you look back and your journey, when I look back at my journey, and then I realize all the times, like, I didn't know that I had it in me to do this, but
Yeah.
somehow I held through, and here I am. So that's helped me. I think feeling like I'm taken care of by the universe is holding me. Yeah,
That's
that's helped me.
yeah. I'm a little emotional. I will say I do think you're one of the perfect guests for this podcast because it is about people who create their own paths, uncharted territory, create their own story where there's no blueprint, there's no guideline of somebody who has done that before. Making such a life for yourself it's a lot of work. It's I've done that in parts of my life, and I feel like there's so much more energy and so much more effort that it takes to push through, and you need to have that mental fortitude for that. How do you balance that with sustaining yourself, talking about sustainability for the future and the next step? And as I'm saying this, for the listeners, you're moving and, can I say, uprooting your life a little bit in the next few days to another continent. And so, what does life hold for you? What does that look like?
Yeah. Yes, in terms of sustaining myself, or even like what motivates me or drives me to continue doing what I'm doing, I think it's very important to have a very strong purpose. And that
Absolutely.
purpose could be, and I've spoken to many people whose purpose is mainly they mainly wanted to have kids and have a good family. That's perfectly fine. That's their purpose. But
Mm,
for me, from a very young kid
yeah.
till now, I one thing that I've noticed about me very constantly is that it's that deep sense of right and wrong that used to make me question a lot of things. I'm passionate about what's right, what's wrong, what's ethical, what's unethical. There's so many people in this world just moving on with their lives, but that did not serve
Mm,
me when I did that, when I tried to suppress it. But then you realize that, yeah, I need to have a very strong sense of purpose for life. And to me, that is, or maybe this is what we grew up even listening to. They who always said, think about your, not just yourself and your family, think about the society. And one thing that, with just going back to everything that's happening with the world, if we turn a blind eye, either I am too ignorant or too arrogant to think that this is not going to come knocking at my doorstep someday. And that drives me to, you know, see how, in whatever way I can, how can I make this better? And more importantly, there are so many people who feel they're voiceless. Like, think about farmers. They're voiceless. And a lot of people that are getting affected by this whole data center is the backward classes and the backward tribes who had received that land 50 years ago, and now they're slowly trying to get pushed out. So who is
Yeah,
going to be the voice for that voiceless community? I
I'm
think
glad.
these are the questions that drive me to some extent, but hopefully I'll be able to see some results and not just frustration like it is at this point.
I bet. I bet. I ask all my guests this, and I'd love to hear from you as well. What does without permission mean to you?
I think you touched upon this, which is basically carving your own path, which comes from staying true to yourself. And you and I both know this, where girls are supposed to be a certain way, and we were judged for being different. And for the longest time, I was cursing myself for like feeling that way, like, oh, maybe I should be like the other girls, or maybe, you know, I shouldn't feel this way, or I should act this way, or I shouldn't act this way. But then as you grow older in life, you realize, you got to stay true to yourself. And that is going to be your North Star that will lead you to your true purpose. And you just got to feed it. It's basically a seed within you that you keep watering, and it
Mm,
grows, and rest all is noise.
That is a great line to end with this, and I really appreciate that. Nisha, this conversation has been more than I had ever hoped for. Although I did know that it was going to be a great conversation, and I do want to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts as well. And thank you. Yeah.
Well, I am so glad that we got to do this. And I'm so happy to see that you officially have a podcast now, Wesh, because we sit and talk about so many different topics
Yeah.
under the sun. And finally, we were able to do that live. And I really hope this touches people's lives and people get something out of it, in whether it's in a small way or a big way, whatever that is. But so I'm very grateful for being a part of this.
I'm glad too. And from your thoughts to permeate into everywhere, because that's exactly the idea behind the podcast. And I can't end it on a better note. So thank you.